My name is Aurora James. 1 year ago I woke up in the very house I had designed, and was thrown out of it like a thief, with a slap, a cold divorce petition, and the indifferent eyes of the man I once thought was everything. At the time, I didn't even know I was pregnant. And I certainly didn't know that the woman who stepped out of his bedroom, the one who used to call me sister-in-law, had replaced me in everything. My marriage, my career, even the blueprint that carried my name. Have you ever been replaced by the person you trusted most? Leave a comment if you've ever felt that way. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that sometimes a collapse is just the beginning of something bigger. Because in the end, this isn't a love story. It's the journey of how I rebuilt my life from the ashes they left behind. And you'll want to know how I did it. I grew up in a small town near the Idaho border, where winters were bone-chilling, summers were coated in dust, and the greasy smell of motor oil. My dad was a mechanic, a quiet man with a bad back who never said "I love you," but always woke up early to pack an extra egg sandwich into my bag on winter mornings. Mom died when I was 8. After that, I taught myself everything: patching sleeves, changing tires, researching scholarships, and staying quiet when something hurt. No one in our town had even heard of Princeton except my 11th grade English teacher, the one who handed me a scholarship application and mailed it behind my father's back. I was accepted with a full ride for architecture. I left town on a day in August, holding a suitcase with a broken zipper, and carrying nothing in my chest except a pencil drawing I made at 13, of a cabin I dreamed of building someday. I told myself if I'm good enough, if I work hard enough, one day no one will ever call me the mechanic's daughter again. I met Nathan Carter when I was 25 while presenting my concept for sustainable green spaces at a real estate investment conference in San Francisco. He was the youngest investor in the room, but no one ignored him. Sharp suit, decisive presence, a smile that disarmed you just enough to drop your guard. I remember how he stood up mid-panel, walked directly to the student exhibit where I was guarding my model, pointed at my design and said, "Do you realize this blueprint makes the entire room forget everything else?" But I had no idea what to say. I just stared at him like an idiot. Then he extended his hand. "Nathan, I don't know anything about your resume, but I want to take you to dinner. Convince me why my firm needs you." That dinner lasted 3 hours. Then came emails about architecture, late-night calls about paint colors, and mornings when he showed up outside my dorm to hand me coffee and ask, "How late were you up last night?" We fell in love fast. The kind of headstrong love two people have when they believe the future belongs to them. One night, while walking beneath the Golden Gate Bridge, I asked him, "Aren't you scared? I'm not exactly the kind of girl your mother would be proud of." He laughed and put his arm around me. "I love you, not your background." I believed that, so much that I ignored the way his mother stirred her tea with her pinky raised when I first came over. A very polite, very clear signal: I don't touch things beneath my standards. After the wedding, Nathan suggested I stay home to design our new lakefront villa instead of working at the company. "You should pour your whole heart into creating our home," he said. I didn't argue. That project brought me so much joy. Every detail, every shaft of light, every stone tile was my choice, not trendy, not for resale value, but the way I imagined a family should live: warm, private, and open enough that kids could run without crashing into glass cabinets. I still worked part-time for a small design firm in Portland, where people called me Aurora, the girl with cinnamon-scented blueprints and homemade lunchboxes. I avoided joining Carter Development directly, partly to prevent any conflict of interest and partly so Nathan wouldn't have to hear his mother whisper that I was riding his coattails. Sometimes I stood in the hallway of our home staring at the brick wall I'd chosen, the windowsill I'd designed to catch morning light on a cup of tea, and thought, I finally have a place that's mine. What I didn't realize was that to some people, if your name isn't on the deed, nothing is really yours, not even your own life. And they took it, neatly, without warning. I don't know when the suspicion first started. Maybe it was on the morning of my 31st birthday when Nathan placed a bouquet of sunflowers on the kitchen counter, smiled like everything was normal, and left saying he had an emergency meeting with the project team. I remember standing there. In that kitchen I had oriented for morning sun. with walnut wood and the exact granite I loved, and something icy crawled up my spine. A very old instinct, as if my body sensed what was coming before my heart could stop pretending to trust. There was no card with the flowers. And Nathan never forgot the card. 3 days later, I reopened the software that controlled the backyard's irrigation cameras. Not because I suspected anything, but because I remembered scheduling the lavender to water that evening and hadn't caught its usual scent through the window. I scrubbed through the footage, and I saw her. She entered through the back door at 4:17 p.m., the exact time I was sitting alone at a downtown restaurant, waiting for a birthday dinner Nathan couldn't make. She wore an emerald dress, one not meant for meetings. Her hair was pulled high, the way women do when they know exactly which angle makes them look effortlessly seductive. Nathan opened the door, greeted her with a smile I no longer remembered ever being meant for me. Their hands touched, then they disappeared inside. There was no sound, but I didn't need audio to understand what was happening. Inside my own house, on the day I was born. Her name was Emily Shaw, a young real estate broker who often showed up at Carter Development side events. I'd seen her at project launches, always hovering near Nathan's assistants, but never like that, never as part of the home I had built. A week later, I received a letter from his family's law firm, a divorce proposal. Inside it was a document so dense, so layered with legal traps it took me 3 readings to catch what was really going on, and I have a degree in architecture. They called it a post-nuptial asset agreement. I remember sitting in the reading nook, in the armchair I had placed under that springlit window. My hands trembled as I flipped through it. Everything was under Nathan's name, that I knew. But the clauses buried in the fine print are what gutted me. I wasn't entitled to any shared assets, I wasn't allowed to use any imagery designs or models associated with the Carter estate, including the lakefront villa design. My name appeared nowhere in the copyright sections. I rewound my memory, those times Nathan placed contracts in front of me, with casual explanations like, "There's a third party claiming some overlap in your design details." I believed him, and I signed. No lawyer, no witness, I assumed it was internal. I trusted Nathan not to put me in danger. I confronted him after reading everything. "I signed this because I thought we were a team," I said, my voice strangely calm. "But you used it to cut me out of the work I poured myself into." Nathan sat at the desk in the reading room, the one I'd lined with my old sketchbooks. He didn't look up. I did what the law allows. And what about ethics? Do they require permission too? He looked at me then, for one brief second, then turned away. "You don't understand how this world works, Aurora. Because I never tried to manipulate it the way you did." I left the room without looking back. But I knew that the moment the door closed, I had stepped out of what looked like love, but was actually a gilded cage I had helped him build. Sometime that night, I sat in my old workspace, the attic room with a window overlooking the lake. I opened the original blueprint of the villa. And I saw something neither Nathan nor Emily knew. In the ground floor rendering, I had embedded personal design markers, a kind of hidden signature many architects use to establish copyright. Details like outlet placements were coded to match the number of days my father and I spent on winter hunts. The initials AG were subtly worked into the backs of built-in cabinets. I used to call it silent love. Now they were silent weapons, and I knew I wouldn't let this end on their terms. I called Cassie one last time on a Sunday afternoon when things had already fractured beyond repair. Cassie had been my best friend since college. The one who fed me soup during finals when I was sick, who cried with me in the bathroom after I was harassed by a former boss. I once believed that if anyone wouldn't turn their back on me, it would be Cassie. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up, her voice unfamiliar, like someone was standing beside her. "Cassie, it's me. I need to see you." "Aurora, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm in a difficult position." I felt my blood run cold. I recognized that tone. The voice of someone who had chosen the other side. "You work for Emily?" "I joined her PR team a few months ago. I didn't tell you because I didn't know how." "Aurora, I'm really sorry." I held the phone tight, trying to keep my voice steady. "You know what they did to me, Cassie. You know exactly what happened." I don't know the full story. And breakups, divorce, they're complicated. I can't take sides. Not taking sides means turning your back on the person who stood by you through everything. Cassie whispered, "I hope you'll be okay," then hung up. I sank to the cold wooden floor, leaning against the door. The screen flashed. Call ended. Just like everything else in my life at that point. My bank account was frozen 2 weeks later. Nathan announced an investigation into unusual personal expenses, a legal way to delay asset division, even though I had nothing left to hold on to. I had nowhere to go. The villa's security code had been changed. The car was under Nathan's name. My credit cards were deactivated. Everything I once believed was shared had been clearly reclassified. Not mine. I moved into a dingy attic room in Old Town Portland, where rain leaked through the ceiling exactly where I had placed my bed. The space barely fit a single mattress, a worn desk, and a small electric stove. I applied for food assistance and held an EBT card for the first time in my life. My hands trembling. That first night, I ate instant noodles from a plastic container under the dim light of a mismatched desk lamp. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I didn't cry. I stared at a crack in the ceiling, trying to see the shape of what used to be mine. I found a night shift cleaning job at a small art studio near the Pearl District, where young artists rented space to paint, dance, or host pop-up exhibits. No background check required. All they asked was that I show up on time and keep the floors clean. Each shift started at 9 p.m. and ended around 2 a.m. Portland was bitter cold and hauntingly empty at those hours. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, pushed a mop across the floors, my rubber gloves always smelling faintly of bleach. Some nights my vision blurred while scrubbing. I felt like I was disappearing, bit by bit, from the world I used to belong to. No one knew I'd once spoken at a sustainability design conference. No one remembered I'd once been honored at that architecture exhibition. I was the night janitor. I didn't realize I was pregnant until the dull ache in my stomach lasted several nights. I had once been told I couldn't conceive. My fertility had been severely affected by an accident at 18. But somehow, my body had chosen this time to send a miracle and then, cruelly, take it back. I miscarried on a cold, rainy night. A wave of sharp pain hit while I was cleaning the third-floor gallery. Blood ran down my legs, staining the bottom of my faded jeans. I was completely alone, with nothing but a mop and faint classical music drifting up from downstairs. I collapsed to my knees, gripping a display table, my body shaking. The pain came in waves, tearing through me. I tried to breathe, tried not to pass out, tried not to call anyone. Because who was left to call? I dragged myself back to the rented room at dawn, my sweater soaked through, my face drenched in sweat. I lay on the floor, clutching my stomach, staring at the half-moon window where moonlight used to shine through. It was only me, with a life that never had the chance to be. I blacked out from exhaustion. When I woke up, it was blindingly bright outside. There was no funeral, no one to say goodbye. But I knew I had lost a part of myself that night, and what remained would never be the same. I met Mrs. Eleanor Wren on a gloomy Sunday afternoon at the studio where I worked night shifts. She was the only person still there after closing, a silver-haired woman wearing pearl-strung glasses, struggling to gather fallen sketches from a display. I wasn't sure if she was an artist or a guest, but as I entered the room, she turned and said, in a graceful, calm voice, "Could you help me fix this frame? My hands aren't as steady as they used to be." I walked over and quickly replaced the cracked glass with a spare from the storage drawer. She watched me for a moment, then asked, "Did you study design?" I froze. That question, asked in that context, felt like a soft collision with memories buried in dust. "I studied architecture, but now I clean here." She nodded gently, as if filing that detail somewhere in her mind. After a pause, she added, "I used to be a litigation attorney, retired 7 years ago. Still drop by now and then to see what today's youth are dreaming up." I gave a faint smile. She continued, "I noticed you added a fabric spacer behind the frame to prevent warping. That's not part of janitorial work, you know what you're doing." I started to turn away, but she went on. When I was younger, I represented an artist whose boyfriend stole all her ideas and sold them under someone else's name. Do you know why she lost? Because she had no evidence, nothing but her word. And tears. Then she looked straight at me. Are you letting someone do that to you? I hadn't planned to answer, but her gaze, seasoned by courtrooms where women were always told not to be too emotional, made my throat tighten. Someone took my design and erased my name from everything. And you're gonna let them keep it? I shook my head. No, but I don't know where to start. 3 days later, I found a small envelope slipped under my door. No sender listed. Inside was a handwritten note and a student ID card. Your records have been resubmitted. This is your temporary ID. First class starts Monday 9 a.m. Don't be late, E-Web. The card was from a small independent design school in the Northwest District. The same one I used to dream of attending as a student, but never dared to apply to because it was too expensive. I showed up on Monday not knowing if anyone was actually expecting me, but the woman at the front desk called my name as soon as I walked in. Aurora James? You're in spatial form restoration with Professor March, right? Room 203? I stood there for a second before nodding. The class wasn't large, around 10 students, mostly recent graduates or moms returning to the workforce. I was the only one who already had a college degree, but also the only one who ate lunch alone. No one knew I used to live in a lakefront villa. No one knew I had signed divorce papers with blood still on my hands from a miscarriage the night before. And I didn't tell them. I began redrawing the original blueprint of the villa, but this time, I didn't replicate it exactly. I turned it into a new version, preserving the basic frame but reworking the lighting, windows, spatial flow. I added details only someone who had lived in that house every day would think of. I embedded a small encoded string into the grid of the garden lights. A sequence of numbers marking the days I'd received handwritten letters from my father before he died. I placed the AA insignia as a negative space inside the ceiling structure, only visible on the technical construction drawing. I redrew the backyard down to every lavender bush in the exact order I'd planted them, only I knew which season each one bloomed and when to cut it back. Every line was a slice of memory. Every pencil stroke was a breath from someone who'd once been suffocated but kept living. I handed the drawing to my instructor at the end of the term. He looked at me for a long moment, then asked, "Would you like to apply for copyright registration? This model has clear commercial value." I nodded. I needed it in my name, legally, undeniably, untouchably mine. 1 year later, I walked into the new headquarters of Soulrise Collective, an independent investment fund run by women, dedicated to startups founded by single mothers and those rebuilding after divorce. They hired me as a design advisor for interior and exterior projects, not because I had a prestigious degree, but because the founder, a woman who had escaped an abusive marriage, saw something in my portfolio that most people missed. I understood what it felt like to start over, in a space that no longer felt like yours. Every home I redesigned became a story. A small apartment in Tacoma for a nurse whose husband had cheated with her best friend. A modest house in Eugene for a mother of 4 who lost everything in her divorce. These weren't glamorous spaces, but every detail had a purpose. Windows placed to the east so the owner could catch the morning sun from bed. A green kitchen to soothe anxious minds. Soft rugs for children who loved to read lying on the floor. I never thought design could heal, but when I saw them cry in their new space, I understood. Coming back doesn't always need to be announced. Sometimes it just means living as your full self again. One Friday afternoon, I was reviewing layout drafts for a community housing project in Olympia when Riley, my young assistant, approached with a hot cup of tea and a hesitant tone. "Aurora, I think you need to see this." She handed me the iPad. An article on the homepage of a Seattle architecture magazine. The headline hit me like a slap. Carter Development unveils revolutionary riverfront complex design in Queen Anne. A work by Emily Shaw. The rendering appeared below. A sweeping architectural composition with soft curved arches, honeycombed stone paths, recessed floor lighting. Every detail. It was the design that had been taken from me 2 years ago. I zoomed in on the garden layout and felt my heart drop. The arrangement of the lavender beds, the position of the trellis. the pergola with the scalloped roof trim, based on the shape of my mother's eyebrows. Not a resemblance, not a coincidence, pure theft, bold and shameless. The caption below the image read, "Designed by Emily Shaw, inspired by modern femininity, minimalist, yet emotionally rich." It felt like someone was rewriting my name on the walls of my own memory, smearing over every drop of sweat I had poured into it. Riley whispered. "I recognized it because of the scalloped pergola. You told me about it. No one else could have drawn that detail the same way." I nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. "Call the lawyer." I returned to Eleanor Wren's office for the first time in nearly 8 months. She didn't move as quickly as before, but her gaze was still razor sharp. Legal scalpel sharp. "Where did they pull that design from?" she asked. Straight to the point. "From the files I gave Nathan to register internally, back when I was his wife. Then I signed a temporary rights waiver, thinking it was to resolve a copyright dispute. I trusted him too much," she said. "And we'll make them understand something. Trusting the wrong person is a mistake, but underestimating you is a disaster." We filed a lawsuit against Carter Development and Emily Shaw personally for architectural copyright infringement and unauthorized use of protected design materials. I submitted the original drawings, which I had registered for copyright during that class last year, with all hidden encryption codes, my digital signature on the paper sketches, and the raw files with metadata identifying me as the creator. But the strongest evidence wasn't on paper. It came from the plant camera footage. Something Nathan had long forgotten. I still had the backup clip from the day Emily Shaw walked into my house with the design folder in hand, and Nathan himself opened the door, smiled, and said, "Just use the drawing, she'll never dare say a word." That voice, that look. Inside the space I had created, I stayed up all night, cutting the video down to 16 seconds. 16 seconds that could take down an empire. The preliminary hearing opened at King County Court. Carter Development's legal team argued that Emily Shaw had been inspired by various designs, with no direct proof of infringement. Until I presented all the evidence. Every drawing, every hidden marker, every unmistakable match, and finally the 16-second video. No one in the room said a word as Nathan's face appeared on screen, his voice echoing. "Go ahead and use the drawing, she'll never dare say a word." I remained still, hands on my lap, chin lifted. Because I had spoken, and this time, I had everything they needed to hear. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Not because of the air conditioning, but because of the way people looked at me. People who once knew me as someone else. Aurora Carter. Now, they saw me as a threat. Nathan sat on the right side of the room, wearing a gray suit and black tie, his gaze confident but tired. Next to him, Emily Shaw in a cobalt blue dress, hair perfectly waved, sitting upright like someone who still believed she'd win. I faced them from across the room, sitting beside Eleanor Wren, who didn't speak much but whose eyes were sharp as needles, fixed on the other side like she'd memorized every move of this game. The trial opened with a generic statement from Carter Development's counsel. Their lawyer said, "The Queen Anne project is the result of internal collaboration by our design team. Ms. Aurora James, though previously associated with our client, served only as an early phase sketch artist and holds no intellectual property rights." Emily nodded in agreement, smiling slightly, lifting her chin as if that statement were unquestionable. When asked to speak, she didn't hesitate. She was someone who once sketched a draft for an old project. She gave up that role long ago. Yes, she used to be Nathan's wife, but that doesn't mean she gets to interfere with everything we do. I opened the folder in front of me, placed my original blueprint on the table and gently slid it toward the bench. Before you is the full architectural design, copyright registered on April 14th of last year. It contains embedded technical markers, randomly placed elements that only the original architect would know. The judge, a woman in her 50s with a firm gaze, raised an eyebrow. "You're saying there are hidden personal identifiers?" "Yes, Your Honor. For example, in the ground floor drawing, the AG initials are concealed beneath the three-dimensional flooring layout. In the lighting system, I encoded the number 1107, the day I submitted my thesis." The entire room fell silent. "Additionally, I'm submitting security footage from the garden of my home. showing Mr. Nathan Carter handing design documents to Ms. Emily Shaw, without any form of legal transfer. I nodded to the technician to play the video. The screen lit up. Nathan opened the door holding a folder and his voice rang through the speakers. "Just use the drawing, she'll never dare speak up." A flicker of panic crossed Nathan's face. Emily turned away, clutching her handbag tightly. I continued. "Lastly, I'd like to present an audio recording from the night Mr. Carter asked me to sign a temporary rights agreement, citing a third-party copyright claim. In reality, there was no active legal dispute at that time. The conversation clearly shows I was misled and denied objective legal counsel." The judge interrupted. "Does the plaintiff object to the admission of this recording?" Their attorney remained silent. Nathan had nothing left to say. Emily whispered something into her lawyer's ear, her composure starting to crack. 2 hours later, after reviewing the evidence, the judge ruled. The court recognized Aurora James as the legal owner of the original design related to the Queen Anne project. All current use, development, and publication of the design by Carter development must cease immediately, pending further orders. Civil damages will be addressed in the next hearing. Court is adjourned. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Nathan didn't look at me. He gathered his papers, expression blank, like a businessman calculating his losses. Emily stood abruptly, trying to rush out, but was met by a crowd of reporters outside the courtroom. One shouted, "Is she your ex-wife, the original architect of that design?" A camera flash burst. The flickering lights struck like slaps across the facade they had built. I walked out of court as my full name, Aurora, not the shadow hidden in someone else's architectural legacy. I didn't have to say anything. The court had spoken for me, and this time, they couldn't erase my name from what I'd created. A week after the hearing ended, I received the first message from Nathan. "I'm sorry, can I see you?" I stared at the screen for a long time. My finger hovered over delete, then paused. I didn't delete it, I left it unanswered. Then I set the phone down and made tea, like I did every morning. 3 days later, I saw him standing in the lobby of Soul Rise Collective. No assistant, no bodyguard, no shield from the curious glances of passers-by. I signaled to Riley not to alert security. As I stepped outside, Nathan looked at me, his eyes unguarded for the first time. No mask, no defense. "You still plant white daisies along the porch. I walked past a new home yesterday and caught the scent. It reminded me of you. I know this can't be undone. I'm not asking to come back." I wanted to say this, not to defend myself, but so you'd know the truth. When you left, I didn't immediately give Emily the design. At first I thought I'd scrap the project, but my mother, she threatened to pull funding if I stayed involved with someone like you. Emily whispered to me every day, "You'd sue me, destroy me, that the world would laugh if I let a degreeless ex-wife beat me." He gave a broken laugh. "I chose reputation, and I lost everything." "Not everything," I said. "You still have yourself, if you're brave enough to look back." He lowered his head, hands clasped together. "Are you angry with me?" I was, "Not anymore." "Do you forgive me?" "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I no longer need to carry a single ounce of bitterness to prove anything. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting go, taking the chain off your own neck, the one that used to choke you." It felt like he finally understood that an apology isn't for being forgiven. It's so you can face who you are. I walked away first, without looking back. About 3 weeks later, Emily Shaw appeared on the evening news. Not as a promising young designer, but as someone facing 4 counts of copyright theft from 3 architecture firms in New York, Portland, and San Diego. A leaked internal report revealed that Emily had used training designs from a fast-track course, altered a few colors and lines, then claimed them as her own. She had edited metadata in the original files, an act considered a federal violation. The State Architectural Licensing Board suspended her license for 3 years, with a potential lifetime ban for repeat offenses. Some headlines called her the Elizabeth Holmes of architecture. I didn't feel satisfied reading that. Only light, as if someone had lifted the weight that had pressed on my back for the past 18 months. I didn't reply to any more of Nathan's messages. but one night, I wrote a letter. A handwritten note. Careful, short, like a farewell from the past. Nathan, I heard what you said in court. I also saw your eyes the day we met again. I believe for that moment you were sincere. But the truth is, my trust was drained long before you realized you had already lost me. I forgive you, not because you earned it, but because I no longer need to hold on to any anger. I lived long enough in the darkness others made for me. Now I choose my own light. I expect nothing from you. I don't need you to make amends. I don't need redemption. I only ask that from now on, you never use my name to decorate whatever version of the ex-wife you've built in your head. I am still living, and I don't need to be remembered. I sealed the envelope without a return address, then brought it myself to the front desk of Carter Development. No one saw me. I didn't need to be seen anymore to be real. I named my new studio Second Foundation because I believe everyone deserves a solid base to rebuild, even if their first bricks once crumbled beneath them. The studio sat on the corner where two narrow streets met in Portland's Nob Hill, a renovated old building that used to be an abandoned laundromat. I kept the raw brick facade and painted a simple white strip of letters across the front. Second Foundation. Design that heals. My first client was Margaret, a mother of two who had left her husband after 15 years of financial and emotional control. When she walked into my office, she carried a paper bag filled with her children's drawings, a few spiral notebooks, and the floor plan of a 430-square-foot apartment she wanted to turn into the first real home she ever had. I don't need anything fancy, she said, her hands trembling. I just want my daughter to have a soft bed and to hang a picture without asking anyone's permission. We painted the walls a soft buttercream and hung her daughter's painting in the kitchen corner. I suggested a small wooden balcony, enough space for 2 flower pots and a foldable chair. When she stepped into the finished apartment, she hugged me, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. For the first time in 20 years, I feel like I have a name. Not someone's wife or someone's mom, just me. I understood, too well, because I had once stood in an empty room, unsure who I was, other than the shadow of someone who once loved me and left. One October afternoon, while Portland's trees were turning gold, I visited Haven House, a temporary shelter for women and children who had been abandoned. I didn't go there as an architect but as a volunteer, mopping floors, cleaning rooms, playing with the kids on weekends. That day, a little girl around 4 sat alone by the window, silent, her black hair tangled, dark brown eyes swallowing the autumn light. She came in yesterday, the supervisor whispered, left at the bus station, no documents. No one knows her real name. I sat beside her in silence for a while, then asked softly, "Do you like swallows?" She blinked, then nodded. I brushed her hair gently. "Would it be okay if I called you Wren? It means a tiny bird here, but one that's brave. It always finds its way home, no matter how strong the wind." Wren looked at me. Her eyes followed mine like they had flown a long way and were searching for a place to land. A month later, I began the adoption process. 2 months after that, she called me Mommy for the first time, while I was brushing her hair one night. I knelt beside her, my heart full, not because I lacked motherly love, but because I had once lost it and somehow found it again in a tiny form, not born of me, yet bound to me deeper than any bloodline. Wren became the heartbeat in my small apartment. She loved drawing, building wooden block castles she called princess houses, and insisted on labeling every storage box with names she made up herself. One day I asked her, "If you could be anything when you grow up, what would you be?" She answered without hesitation, "I want to build houses for people who are sad like you are sad." The next spring, I stood on stage at a TEDx event in Seattle. Behind me, a large screen displayed the title of my talk, Rebuilding Living Spaces, when architecture isn't just for living but for healing. I wore a simple black dress, holding a microphone, my voice steady and low. In front of me were people hearing my story for the first time, and others who had once watched me be erased from my own creation. I began with a quiet sentence. I no longer live in the house I once designed, but I live in a home I chose, every detail of it, with my own hands and courage. I told them about Margaret, about Wren, about women who once believed they didn't deserve a place to belong. And I ended with a whisper. Rebirth is not a moment, it's a series of small choices, repeated every day. Like daring to move your favorite chair back into the sunlight, or keeping a photo someone else told you to throw away. In the audience, I saw Wren waving. She wore a pink dress, hugging the teddy bear I had sewn from scraps of my old wedding gown. I smiled at her, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a quiet stability inside, like a foundation finally set, unmoved, no matter who stepped through the door. May rain in Portland doesn't crash down like winter storms, it falls gently, in misty layers like a soft veil. I stood in the lobby of Riverstone Gallery, where warm lights cast shadows on miniature house models, each one telling its own story, rebuilt from the broken memories of people who once believed they didn't deserve the word home. The exhibition was called Homes No One Could Break, a labor of love from me and my team at Second Foundation. Every model was the result of months of listening, designing and building alongside women who had walked out of toxic marriages, abuse, or simply homes where there had never been space for them. At the far end of the gallery was the design I once created for that lakefront villa, now encased in glass. Not to glorify it, but to remind people that what seems like a beginning can also be your first lesson in never letting someone else write their name on your work. Wren ran around, her hair tied in 2 bouncing pigtails. She wore a Seymour dress I had sewn from one of Eleanor's old shirts. Eleanor, who had passed peacefully 3 months earlier, leaving behind a scholarship in her name for women in architecture. I knelt to tie Wren's shoelace as the mic crackled from the small stage in the corner. Please welcome architect Aurora James to speak. I walked slowly to the stage, no nerves in my chest. My eyes scanned the room. Friends, colleagues, former clients, young architecture students. And near the back, by the entrance, I saw a familiar figure. Nathan, wearing a dark coat, hands empty. His eyes followed me, not asking for anything, only watching, as if finally understanding the true cost of losing something original. I didn't let my gaze linger. I picked up the microphone, my voice calm under the wood and glass ceiling. For a long time, I thought I was a replacement version, someone who was once there, once involved, then erased like a footnote in a final draft. I lived for months like a ghost in a house I had designed. I paused, looking toward the model in the center of the room, the replica of Margaret's apartment with her daughter's painting on the wall. But eventually I realized I wasn't a copy. I was the original. Flawed, yes, bent sometimes, but not replicable, not replaceable, and especially not erasable, because someone louder or easier to control stepped in. Applause rose from the crowd. I saw Riley wipe away a tear, and Wren stood on tiptoe to wave at me, half-eaten cookies still in hand. I smiled and bowed deeply. When the exhibit ended, I took Wren's hand. The rain had stopped, but the pavement still shimmered with light. We walked home through the bright streets of the Pearl District. Wren skipped beside me, clutching my hand, her face tilted upward. Mommy, can I build houses like you when I grow up? I gave her hand a gentle squeeze, feeling her pulse like a steady song I no longer feared dropping. Not houses, sweetheart, you can build anything, even yourself. She nodded seriously as if making a mental note in an invisible notebook, then suddenly jumped into a puddle, shattering the quiet moment with laughter. I looked at her wet hair, bright eyes, and I thought, maybe the strongest thing I ever built wasn't a house. It was the belief that even if burned down, I could rise again. Have you ever felt replaced? Like everything you built, everything you believed in, could be erased by someone else's decision? I know that feeling not from theory, but from sleepless nights, hand-scrubbing floors, and breathing through the last thread of self-worth. But here's the miracle. Sometimes it's in the ashes that you rediscover the most unshakable version of yourself. Not the version others wanted, the one that cannot be copied. What about you? What part of this story made you stop and think? Have you ever lost everything then started again with your own 2 hands? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every word. And if this story spoke to you, don't forget to follow the channel. There are more journeys ahead. Stories of family, rebirth, and the quiet power of resilience, waiting in the next episodes.